Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
It's great to be back.
Today we're diving into a document that, honestly, it reads like an adventure story from a lost world. We are going to follow a man named Faxian, a Chinese Buddhist monk from the year 399 AD.
And his journey is just staggering to think about. He decides to walk, literally walk, from central China across what he calls the River of Sand, that's the Gobi Desert, and then over the Onion Range Mountains.
Which are just unbelievably high snow-covered peaks.
Exactly. And he's not doing this for gold or for trade or for glory. He's looking for something much more abstract. He's looking for rules.
The Vinaya, the books of discipline for monks, which he felt were lost or corrupted in China.
And that journey sets up the central paradox we're going to wrestle with today, because this worldview he's a part of, early Buddhism, is famous for its claim that there is no God in the universe and no soul in man.
That's the headline you always hear, the atheistic religion.
Right. But as we walk with Faxian, his world is absolutely teeming with supernatural beings. I mean, we're talking dragons, heavenly spirits called devas, constant miracles, magical relics that defy physics.
So how does that work? How do you reconcile a universe with no God, but which is also filled to the brim with divine magic? That's the puzzle we're going to try and piece together.
It really is. It's a fundamental challenge to our modern category.
So let's start at the beginning. The man himself. Who was Faxian?
Well, his family name was actually Kung, and he was from a place called Shanxi. And his backstory, it really gives you a sense of his motivation. It's quite poignant.
What happened?
He had 3 older brothers, and all of them died in infancy before they even shed their first teeth.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can imagine his father's terror. He's afraid of losing this 4th son as well. So he dedicates Faxian to the service of the Buddhist society while he's still just a little boy. He becomes a Ramanera, a novice.
So it's almost like a spiritual insurance policy.
Yeah.
To protect him.
That's a perfect way to put it. If I give him to the Buddha, maybe death will pass him over. And, Faxian really took to this life. There's this one story from when he was young that just tells you everything you need to know about his character.
Okay.
He was out in the fields, cutting rice with some of the other novices, and a group of hungry thieves show up to steal the grain.
And everyone panics, I assume.
They do. The other novices just run for it. But Faxian, he stands his ground.
Does he fight them? Like some kind of proto-kung fu monk?
No, and that's what's so fascinating. He doesn't use violence at all. He uses philosophy. He basically lectures them on karma.
You're kidding, to armed robbers.
He says to them something like, if you must have the grain, take what you please, but know that it was your past neglect of charity that brought you to this state of poverty.
That is an incredibly gutsy thing for a kid to say. He's essentially telling them, I'm sorry your past life karma is so terrible that you have to rob me now.
It's a massive power move. He's not afraid of them. He pities them. And apparently it worked. The thieves were so stunned, they just left the grain and went away.
That one story tells you he's not an ordinary person.
Not at all. So let's fast forward. It's 399 AD. Faxian is now a full monk living in the capital, Chang'an. And he's talking with his classmates, men like Wei King and Tao Ching, and they're all lamenting the state of their religion in China.
What was the problem?
He described the texts they had as mutilated and imperfect. You have to remember, Buddhism was an import to China. It came over the Silk Road. They had some of the sutras, the big philosophical ideas, but they were missing the fine print.
The Vinaya, the rule book.
Exactly. Imagine trying to run an army, but all you have is a book of poetry about patriotism. You don't have the drill manual, the code of conduct, the regulations. They were just, improvising how to run a monastery. And for a man like Faxian, who clearly values discipline, this was intolerable.
So they decided to go to the source.
They make a pact. They're going to India. They're going to walk there and bring back the original rules.
Which brings us to the first great obstacle. This river of sand, the Gobi Desert.
And Faxian's description of this place, it's just bone-chilling. It's where the journey stops being a trip and starts being a kind of psychological ordeal.
What does he write?
He says, in this river of sand, there are evil demons and hot winds. And he claims that when you encounter them, not 1 in 10,000 escapes with his life.
So it's not just the heat and lack of water, it's actively malevolent.
In his worldview, yes, the landscape is haunted. But it's the sensory deprivation that really, I think, gets to you. He writes, there is no bird flying above, no beast roaming below.
It's a total void. Nothing.
A complete void. And think about how you navigate that. There's no road, no landmarks. He says the only way to know your direction is by looking up at the sun, the moon, and the stars. That's your only guide.
What about on the ground? What do you look for?
This is the part that always gets me. The only landmarks are the dry bones of the dead left upon the sand.
So, the road signs are the skeletons of the people who failed to make the journey before you.
That's your map. It's horrific. But it's also, I think, the first piece of our puzzle about this godless religion, this journey into a literal physical void, is also a metaphor.
How so?
Well, in Buddhism, this high philosophical concept of emptiness, or sunyata, is central. It's the idea that nothing has a fixed, permanent self. But that's an idea. Faxian is physically walking through it. The sheer psychological weight of relying on death-dry bones to find the rules for living, it sets the tone for everything that comes after.
That's a powerful way to frame it. He has to walk through nothingness to find meaning.
And he survives. He and his companions, they make it across. They climb the Onion Range Mountains, which is a whole other ordeal of snow and altitude sickness. And they finally descend into what was then northern India.
And this is where we have to pause and really tackle this God problem head on, because the text itself seemed to contradict itself constantly.
It does, and we have to be really precise with our terms. Let's start with the translator's note. James Legg, who did this English translation, includes a footnote right in chapter 2, and he lays it out very clearly.
What does he say?
He says that Buddhism, as understood from these texts, acknowledges no God in the universe, no soul in man, and has no services of sacrifice or prayer in its worship.
Okay, so that's the official doctrine. No creator God. No eternal soul that goes to heaven or hell.
Correct. If you cornered a classical Buddhist philosopher and asked who made the world, they'd likely say, that's the wrong question. It wasn't made. It's an endless cycle of cause and effect. There's no architect, no one pulling the strings.
But then, Faxian starts writing down what he actually sees and experiences in India. And it is not a world of cold, rational cause and effect.
Not even close. It's a world filled with supernatural beings. He's constantly encountering devas, which are basically heavenly beings or gods. He sees dragons, he witnesses miracles.
So what's going on? Is the translator wrong? Is Faxian just being superstitious?
This is the crucial distinction. When a modern Westerner hears atheism, they think of scientific materialism, a universe of atoms and energy and nothing else. But that is not what's going on here. This is a non-theistic religion that is still, absolutely packed with spirits.
Okay, so what is the difference between atheistic and non-theistic in this context? If there are devas, how is there no God?
It's all about hierarchy and function. In Faxian's world, gods absolutely exist. They're real, just like people or animals are real. But, and this is the whole game, they are not supreme. They didn't create the universe.
So they're just another life form, albeit a very powerful one.
Exactly. They're like the universe's 1%ers. They have longer lifespans. They have magical powers. They live in heavenly palaces.
Okay.
But they are still in the system. They're still stuck.
Stuck in what?
In samsara. The endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. They are subject to karma, just like we are. They experience suffering, even if it's a very high-class form of suffering.
That is a radical idea. And the text has a perfect illustration of this, right? The story of the Traystrons' heaven.
Yes, in chapter 7, this story clarifies the entire pecking order of the cosmos. It's essential.
The legend is that the Buddha, after his enlightenment, ascended to this heaven, it's called the Heaven of the 33, to preach the law to his mother, who had been reborn there as a diva.
Right, and he stays there for 3 months, teaching her and the other gods, which, right away, tells you something.
That even the gods need to go to school. They need the Buddha's help.
Precisely. But the real mind-blowing part is what happens when he decides to come back down to Earth.
This is the image. He doesn't just float down. A magical staircase appears, made of 7 precious substances. But he's not alone. He has an entourage.
And who is in that entourage? It's the heavy hitters from the other major religion in India at the time, Brahmanism, what we'd now call a precursor to Hinduism.
You have Brahma, who in their system is the creator of the universe.
And you have Sakra, also known as Indra, who is the king of the gods, the thunder-wielding chief deity, the Zeus of their pantheon.
And are they angry? Are they trying to smite the Buddha for being a heretic?
No, they're his attendants. They are serving him.
This is so wild. The text says that Brahma is holding a white chowri, which is like a ceremonial fly whisk.
And Sakra, the king of heaven, is holding a jeweled umbrella over the Buddha's head to give him shade.
That's not a subtle message. That is a theological coup d'etat depicted in a single image.
It's everything. Faxian isn't saying, your gods don't exist. He's saying, your gods exist and they are disciples of my teacher. The Buddha is not a god. He is the teacher of gods and men. His status comes from being enlightened, from being outside the system of karma and rebirth. The gods are still very much inside it.
So it's not there is no God. It's more like the beings you call gods are not the ultimate authority.
That's it in a nutshell. The ultimate authority is the Dharma, the law of cause and effect and liberation, and the Buddha is the one who figured it out.
This tension plays out again and again, especially when he talks about what he calls the malbelievers.
A great term. He's mostly talking about the Brahmins. He lists something like 96 schemes of erroneous doctrine. He was definitely not a pluralist who believed all paths lead to the same mountaintop.
No, he thought they were just plain wrong. And he records these stories of contests, basically, miraculous showdowns.
Yes, like the one in Sravasti in chapter XX. The malbelievers are jealous of the local Buddhists, so they try to destroy a sacred tree that supposedly grew from a willow stick that the Buddha had chewed on and planted.
Standard stuff. They try to cut it down.
And it grows back instantly. They try to pull it up by the roots, and a spring of water gushes out. It's a classic my magic is stronger than your magic story.
But the more subtle one is this story about the two temples.
Yeah.
This one really gets into the physics of this worldview.
I love this one. So you have a Buddhist vihara, a shrine, and right across the road there's a Brahmin temple. And this temple has a name.
The shadow covered.
A very ominous name. And Faxian describes what happens with the sunlight every day.
He says that when the sun is in the west, in the afternoon, the shadow of the Buddhist vihara falls onto the Brahmin temple.
Okay, that makes sense. Geometrically, that tracks.
But when the sun is in the east, in the morning,
Here we go.
the shadow of the Brahmin temple never falls on the Buddhist vihara. He says the shadow is always deflected to the north.
So the light itself respects the spiritual hierarchy.
Exactly. He's reporting this as an observed physical fact. To him, the universe is constructed in such a way that it bends the laws of physics to prove the superiority of the Buddha's Dharma. The shadow-covered temple is literally and metaphorically overshadowed.
It really reframes how you have to read this text. He's not a modern skeptic observing quaint customs. He's a believer walking through a world where magic is the evidence. The supernatural is the proof that his supposedly non-theistic philosophy is the correct one.
The magic validates the logic.
Perfectly put. And that sense of validation, of a different kind of logic, extends to how he sees the entire world, the geography itself.
This was one of my favorite parts of reading this. As you know, in Chinese, China's name is Zhongguo,
The Middle Kingdom.
the center of the world. It's baked into the language and the culture. Everything else is the barbarian periphery. It's the absolute center of civilization.
That is the standard Han Chinese worldview, for sure. You're either civilized, meaning Chinese, or you're a barbarian.
But Faxian gets to India and just flips the map upside down.
He does. He consistently refers to the area around the Ganges River, central India, as the Middle Kingdom.
Imagine being a Chinese scholar reading this in 420 AD. It must have been a profound shock. Faxian is essentially saying, guess what? We're not the center of the universe. We live out in the borderlands.
It's an act of profound cultural relativity, driven entirely by his faith.
Yeah.
For a devout Buddhist of that era, the political or cultural center of the world is irrelevant. The spiritual center of the world is where the Buddha lived and taught.
Where the holy events happened, that's the real center.
That's the real Middle Kingdom. China, for all its glory, is just a province of the spirit.
And his description of this Indian Middle Kingdom, I mean, he paints it as a near-perfect utopia. It almost sounds too good to be true.
It probably is, to some extent. We have to remember his audience. He's writing to convince people back in China of the power of the Dharma and the Vinaya rules he's bringing back.
So he's part pilgrim, part salesman?
A little bit. Look at how he describes the system of governance in chapter 16. He says there's no decapitation, no corporal punishment. If you commit a crime, you're just fined.
Which, compared to the legalist traditions in China at the time, would have been astonishing.
Absolutely. In China, you could have torture, execution, collective punishment for families. Faxian is presenting a society that is so gentle it doesn't need harsh laws.
He also says there's no registration of households. People can just move wherever they want. If we want to go, they go. If they want to stay, they stay.
It's a 5th century libertarian paradise. No passports, no internal travel documents.
And the diet. This is the one that always stands out. He says throughout the whole country, the people do not kill any living creature, nor drink intoxicating liquor, nor eat onions or garlic.
A nation of vegetarian teetotalers who also avoid the pungent alliums. But there's a very important exception to this idyllic picture, and it shows us the reality beneath the surface.
The Chandalas.
The Chandalas. He calls them the wicked men.
Who are they?
They are the people who do the jobs that violate the core principles, the butchers, the hunters, the fishermen, anyone who deals in death. And they are segregated.
They have to live apart from everyone else.
Completely separate. And when they have to enter a city or a marketplace, they are required to strike a piece of wood as they walk.
A warning signal.
Yes, to warn everyone else to get out of the way so that they don't accidentally touch them and become, ritually contaminated.
So it's a paradise, but it's built on a rigid caste-based system of purity and pollution.
It is. And Faxian reports this without judgment because in his worldview, it makes perfect sense. He is presenting a society governed by the law of karma. If you do impure things like killing animals, then you are impure and you live separately. For him, this isn't an injustice. It's a physical manifestation of a moral law. He's showing his readers, look what happens when a whole society follows the law. It's peaceful and orderly.
But that order has a cost. Yeah. It really does. Okay, let's get back to the core paradox. For a religion that says no soul, they are incredibly, almost obsessively focused on physical bodies, or at least the pieces of them, relics.
The physicality of the spiritual, yes. This is a huge part of his journey. It's a contradiction that confuses a lot of people about Buddhism. If the goal is detachment from the physical world, why would you worship a tooth or a bone?
Exactly. And Faxian's account is a catalog of these powerful objects. Let's start with the skull bone he sees in the city of Anara. The security around this thing is just intense.
It's like the Fort Knox of relics. It's kept in a vihara, a shrine that's made of what he calls 7 precious substances: gold, silver, lapis lazuli, crystal, the works.
And the king of the country has a daily ritual with it.
Every single morning, before he deals with any matters of state, the king goes to the shrine, makes offerings of flowers and incense, and bows down to the skull bone. The state literally does not function until this relic has been honored.
Faxian even describes the bone itself. He says it's yellowish white, 4 inches across, and sort of raised in the middle.
And they have these rituals, like covering it with a bell of gold and jewels, that are all designed to protect and honor this one piece of a body from centuries ago. There's a miracle attached to it, of course.
Of course.
People try to take impressions of the bone by pressing silk and paste onto it. And the pattern that appears on the silk is different for everyone, depending on their karma.
Wow. But maybe the most telling relic story, the one that really explains the philosophy, is the Buddha's alms bowl.
Oh, the alms bowl in Purusharapura. Yes, this one is fantastic. It's a parable in the form of a physical object.
So what's the miracle of the bowl?
It's simple. He says that when poor people come to make an offering and they throw just a handful of flowers into it, the bowl immediately fills to the brim. But when very rich people, merchants or kings, come and throw in thousands of bushels of flowers trying to show off their piety, the bowl never fills up.
It just remains empty.
It remains empty. It's such a powerful piece of social and spiritual commentary. It's a physical law in Faxian's universe that the moral quality of an action matters more than the quantity.
The intent.
The intent. The poor person gives a much larger percentage of what they have, so their offering has more spiritual weight, and the bowl recognizes that. The bowl knows the state of your heart.
Then you have the spectacle of the Tooth Festival in Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka.
Right, and this shows us that this wasn't all just quiet contemplation. This was a religion of massive public pageantry. This was big business.
He describes a huge procession through the city. There are elephants, banners, incense, and they have these models.
Models of the 500 bodily forms that the Buddha took in his previous lives.
These are the Jatakas, the birth stories.
Exactly. And this is where the philosophy gets really visceral and honestly quite violent, because Faxian makes a point of visiting the places on the subcontinent where these Jataka tales supposedly happened.
And these aren't gentle stories about being a wise rabbit.
Not at all. We have this modern, gentle image of Buddhism, but the path to becoming a Buddha, as told in these stories, involves acts of almost unimaginable self-sacrifice.
He visits the spot in chapter 11 where the Buddha, in a past life as a king, had his eyes gouged out and given to another man who wanted them.
And another spot where he gave his head as an offering.
And then the most famous one of all, where he was a prince who encounters a starving mother tigress who is about to eat her own newborn cubs because she's so hungry.
So he just throws his own body off a cliff down to the tigress so she can eat him instead and her cubs can live.
And Faxian treats these places like historical sites. He says, here is the stupa they built to mark the spot where he fed the tigress. For him, this isn't a metaphor. It happened right here.
And you have to ask, why is this violence, this self-mutilation, so central? Why does a monk looking for rules of order care so much about these graphic stories?
What's the answer?
It's the ultimate expression of the no soul or no self doctrine. The ego, the attachment to your own body and your own survival, is the primary obstacle to enlightenment. To become a Buddha, you must be willing to completely annihilate the self for the benefit of other beings.
So the extreme charity proves the philosophical point.
It does. It shows that the Buddha's compassion wasn't just, nice words. It was a willingness to be eaten alive. And you can see how this would resonate with Faxian himself. He is on his own journey of self-abnegation, walking across deserts and mountains. He is sacrificing his body to bring the law back to his people.
It's a perfect parallel. Which brings us to his journey home. After years in India, he's learned Sanskrit, he's copied the manuscripts he came for, he has the prize. Now he just has to get it back.
And for some reason, he decides not to walk back across the desert. He opts for the sea route.
Which turns out to be an absolutely terrible idea.
A catastrophically bad idea. Sea travel in the ancient world was a life-or-death gamble every single time. He gets on a big merchant ship in Ceylon, heading for what is now Indonesia, and of course, they sail straight into a typhoon.
A black wind and torrential rain.
The merchants on board who do this for a living are terrified. The ship is leaking, it's about to founder, and they do what sailors do. They start throwing cargo overboard to lighten the load.
And you have to put yourself in Faxian's position. He has spent more than a decade of his life, risked death a dozen times, to get these books and sacred images. They are his entire reason for being.
And he sees the crew eyeing his baggage. He knows what he has to do. He throws his personal effects overboard, his pitcher, his water basin, the things he needs to survive, but he clings to the books. He physically guards them with his life.
And he prays. And this is a really critical moment for our big question today about atheism and gods.
It is. Look at who and what he prays to.
He doesn't meditate on the concept of emptiness. He prays to a specific being, Quan Xian.
Known in Sanskrit as Avalokitesvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And he also prays to the monkish communities of the land of Han, his fellow monks back in China.
And listen to the words he uses. He says, I have traveled far in search of our law. Let me, by your dread and supernatural power, return from my wanderings and reach my resting place.
Dread and supernatural power. That is not the language of a secular philosopher contemplating physics. That is the language of a desperate man in a sinking ship calling out for help.
It is. This is the practical application of his faith.
And it really resolves the paradox for us. In the high-minded philosophy, there may be no single creator God. But in practice, when your life is on the line, the system functions with beings who have supernatural power and can intervene on your behalf.
So the bodhisattvas act like saints or angels in other religions.
They are the intercessors. They're the ones you call when the waves are crashing over the deck. You don't pray to a concept. You pray to a power that you believe can save you.
And they survive that storm. But the ordeal isn't over. On the next leg of the journey, from Java to China, things get even worse. There are Brahmins on this ship.
The malbelievers.
And they hit another storm. And this time, the Brahmins have an idea about who is to blame.
They turn on Faxian. They say, it is because we have this Ramana, this Buddhist monk on board, that we have this misfortune. He is the bad luck.
It's a classic scapegoat scenario.
And they decide they are going to maroon him. Just dump him on a random desert island and sail away. It's basically the story of Jonah from the Old Testament, but from a different perspective. The religious outsider is causing the storm, so throw him overboard.
But someone stands up for him.
Yes, a patron, another merchant on the ship who is likely a Buddhist sympathizer. He confronts the Brahmins and says, if you land this monk, you will have to land me there as well. Or, if you don't, when we reach China, I will report you to the king and you will be executed.
So he uses the threat of state power.
He does. And it works. They back down. But look the layers of protection Faxian has. He has the supernatural protection of the bodhisattva he prayed to, and he has the secular protection of a king thousands of miles away. Faith and law working together.
They finally make it to land, but they're lost. They land in what is now Shantung province, but they don't know where they are. They see a couple of men out hunting.
And this is such a great little human moment at the end of this epic journey. Faxian goes up to them and asks where he is, who they are.
And the hunters lie. They see this strange man with a shaved head and foreign robes.
And they immediately say, we are disciples of Buddha.
Just to be on the safe side.
You can just imagine them thinking, oh, this looks like a holy man. We better say the right thing. It's a lovely, slightly comical moment.
But he finds out he's home. He's back in China. He has been gone for 15 years.
15 years. And the return is so bittersweet. He's an old man now. Most of his original companions are dead. Wei King froze to death in the mountains. Others just decided to stay in India. Of the original group that set out, he is one of the very few who made it back. He is the survivor.
So let's sum it all up. What was the final achievement? Was it worth all the death, the desert, the storms?
From a historical perspective, it was monumental. He brought back the texts he went for, specifically the Vinaya of the Mahasanghika school. He and his collaborators translated them into Chinese.
You filled in the blanks.
He filled in the huge, gaping blanks in Chinese Buddhism. Before Faxian, running a monastery was based on hearsay and fragments. After Faxian, they had the blueprint. He effectively standardized monasticism in China for centuries. It's an incredible legacy.
But beyond the practical impact of the books, he left us this record, this story.
Yes. And I think the closing envoy of the text, written by a later editor, says it all. It says, "Since the great doctrine flowed on to the east, there has been no one to be compared with Hien." Hien being another name for Faxian.
And what did they say was the reason for his success?
His forgetfulness of self, his sincerity, his willingness to put his life on the line.
And that brings it all full circle, doesn't it? Back to the no-soul doctrine.
It does. In the end, he didn't survive because he was the strongest or the smartest. The text argues he survived because he had dissolved his ego. He didn't care about Faxian the person, he only cared about the law. He exposed his body to what seemed like certain death, not for fame or fortune, but for a set of rules. In a way, he had to become the void that he walked through in the desert.
It's an incredible thought. A man driven by a system that claims no God, yet he sustained every step of the way by a profound faith in supernatural power and divine beings. It really forces you to reconsider what words like religion and faith even mean.
They mean more than just a belief in a creator. They can mean a belief in a purpose so large that your own life becomes secondary to it.
And a willingness to walk through the river of sand to serve that purpose.
Absolutely.
So as we close out this deep dive, here's the thought we want to leave you with. Faxian walked across a continent, climbed the highest mountains on Earth, and survived typhoons at sea, all to find a book of rules. So the question is, how far would you walk to find the rules that order your life?
That's the journey.
Thank you for listening to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. We'll see you on the next deep dive.